Well, we survived the heat wave. As you can tell, fall has returned and I'm in a sweater. Got the last of our apples in the canner with applesauce. So, in a couple more weeks, we're going to be butchering some more rabbits. And my freezer is just really chaotic and a pain in my butt to try and dig through all this stuff to find something that I want to make for dinner. So in an attempt to declutter and organize, I am preparing some quick and easy meals to have in the pantry. So I took 2 whole rabbits out, and with one I'm going to turn into a soup, and the other will just be a broth with meat. So I wanted to show you how we do this and take you along for the ride. So let's get started. Okay, here I have the rabbit. So this one here is going to turn into our soup stock. And this one here will just be, this one here is going to be turned into soup right away. This one here is just going to be the stock. So there is a little bit of difference between the two. So I just put enough water in to get them covered and so that they'll cook and I can shred all the meat off the bone and take the bones out of here. Now over here, so for the one that's going to be turned into soup right away, I have chopped an entire large red onion and 1 bell pepper. That will go in there. I will also put between 1.5 and 2 tablespoons of salt. I will do about a ½ teaspoon of celery seed because I don't have celery, and just a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne because we like it spicy around here, which it really doesn't make it spicy, it just gives it a nice little kick and I like the flavor for it. Now for the stock, I will add garlic. That's the only difference. The soup, or at least this soup in particular, to me tastes better if I can bring out the garlic aromas in the pan before cooking all the soup together. So I'll get this in there and show you what's next. Most people I know for their stock tend to use white or yellow onions. I am a very visual eater. I like lots of color and I like onions. So the little stronger flavor with red onions doesn't bother me at all, or anyone in our family. So for the soup that I'm making today, it's an acorn squash soup. Isn't this guy just so cute? Now, I only got 1 itty-bitty little acorn squash out of our garden, so the same farm that we got all our strawberries from has farm stands all over the place here. So I went and picked up a bunch of spaghetti squash and acorn squash because we did this last year and it was delicious. I really, really enjoyed it. Texture-wise, to eat it just as squash, not a fan of it, but I loved the flavor. And so I thought, there's got to be a way to use this. And we liked it so much, that's why we tried to grow it this year. Wasn't really successful, but hey, we got one. That's what counts. So I have split 1, 2, 3, 4. I was able to fit 4 acorn squash on my cookie sheet. Now, if anyone has any tips on how to bust these things open, short of using a hatchet, I would love to hear it because they are a pain in the butt. I mean, they're even more difficult than spaghetti squash to me. So, I have them all de-seeded out on my cookie sheet. I've got just a little bit of brown sugar. I'm not going to use all this, but I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit in each half of the acorn squash. Oven is preheated to 350 degrees. Put a little bit of brown sugar in on these. Put that in the oven for an hour. And then when those are done, I'll show you what's next. So the acorn squash has finished baking, and I have scooped all the insides out into this bowl. Now my rabbit is to the point where it's falling apart. The meat is nice and tender, so I have shut that off, and I'm going to transfer a few batches at a time, the acorn squash into the blender with a little bit of this broth and blend it up to get it to a puree stage. So let me get that taken care of and then we'll move on. Everything is all blended up, and what you get is a bunch of stuff that looks like baby food. But fear not, it's going to get better and it will be delicious. So set this aside. Don't combine all your stuff yet. Set this aside, pull your meat out, and debone it if you have to. So we are back from soccer practice. That means I get to finish my soup. So I was able to debone all the rabbit. Now we're moving on to the next step. So in a separate crock pot, I have about a 1/4 cup of oil. I personally prefer to use butter, but I've never canned butter in any kind of recipe before, so I'm not sure if it would go rancid or not. So rather than take the chance, I'm just going to use vegetable oil. So I've got a little over a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil in here and a couple tablespoons of garlic, and I'm going to let that simmer until I can smell the wonderful garlic. Speaking of which, I should turn it on. Now, once you start to smell that, I'm going to take my tomatoes. I've got 3 decent-sized tomatoes, and I'm going to dice them up and throw them in there. Let that simmer for a couple of minutes, and then we'll move on to the next part. Right. Now, everything has been combined, and this is the result. Now, I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I'll turn it down and let it simmer for 30-45 minutes, just to make sure all these flavors get plenty of time to blend together. Now, you can adjust this. You don't have to use all of your broth. If you like a thicker, creamier soup, or you want more of that acorn squash flavor, you could use less broth and keep it thick. I'm going for more of a brothy soup this time around. We did a thicker soup last time and just canned the remaining broth, and it was still really good. You could also add rice to this if you wanted, or oats is another really good addition to this soup. So give it a try. Tell me what you think, or if you guys have done other soups with other vegetables, let me know. Have fun with it. Oh, delicious. And look at that thing. That is like almost all the way full. We'll be having soup for days.